On September 22, 1984, customs agents at JFK International Airport detained a 7-year-old girl traveling alone from Palermo to New York. Her name was Lucia Benedetta Torrisi. She carried a single suitcase and a porcelain doll dressed in white lace, its painted face serene, its glass eyes reflecting the fluorescent terminal lights. The doll's name, according to the tag sewn into its dress, was Angelina. During routine inspection, an agent noticed the doll felt unusually heavy. When they carefully removed the doll's torso, they found a .22 caliber Beretta, fully loaded, nestled in a custom-fitted compartment where stuffing should have been. Wrapped around the barrel was a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery, the ink a deep burgundy. It read, "For when the wolves come, Papa loves you always." Beneath the gun, folded into a square no larger than a playing card, was a photograph. It showed a man in his 50s, silver-haired, wearing a dark suit, kneeling beside the same little girl in a garden filled with lemon trees. His hand rested on her shoulder. Her hand rested on the doll. The girl said nothing during questioning. She did not cry. She did not ask for her father. She simply held the doll's empty body and hummed a lullaby in Sicilian dialect, the same melody her mother had sung before she disappeared. This is not a story about a child smuggling a weapon across international borders. This is a story about what happens when a man who has spent his entire life teaching others to fear him tries to teach his daughter to survive in a world he knows will one day come for her. This is a story about love expressed in the only language a killer knows. This is a story about how violence, when passed from father to child, is never just inherited. It is consecrated, ritualized, and wrapped in the trappings of protection until the child can no longer tell the difference between a gift and a curse. This is the story of Salvatore Torrisi, a man who believed that devotion and destruction were two sides of the same coin, and of Lucia, the daughter he armed with both a weapon and a worldview that would define the rest of her life. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from. Which city? Which state? I want to know where this story finds you, because stories like this, they don't stay in the past. They echo. To understand how a father places a loaded gun in his daughter's hands and calls it love, we must go back to a different kind of baptism. One that took place not in a church, but in a slaughterhouse on the outskirts of Palermo on a January morning in 1956. Salvatore Torrisi was 19 years old when he killed his first man. The man's name was Enzo Calabria, a low-level enforcer who had been skimming from the weekly collections. The family, Cosa Nostra, the Sicilian Mafia, did not tolerate theft, especially not from its own. Salvatore's uncle, Don Vittorio Torrisi, had given the order. He had also given Salvatore the knife. "You do this," Vittorio had said, "and you are no longer a boy. You are one of us." The slaughterhouse smelled of iron and salt. Enzo was bound to a chair, his mouth gagged, his eyes wide and wet. Salvatore remembers the way his hands shook as he approached. He remembers Vittorio standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. He remembers the first cut, shallow and hesitant, and the way Enzo's body jerked. He remembers Vittorio's voice, calm and cold. Again, deeper. A man who hesitates is a man who dies. Salvatore did not hesitate the second time. When it was over, Vittorio placed a hand on Salvatore's shoulder, the same gesture he would one day use with his own daughter in the lemon grove. "You are my blood now," Vittorio said, not just by name, by deed. That night, Salvatore was brought to a private chapel on the Torrisi estate. The chapel was small, its walls lined with icons of saints whose eyes seemed to follow him. At the altar stood a priest, Father Domenico, a man whose sermons on Sundays spoke of mercy and whose weeknight confessions absolved men of sins that would never see a courtroom. Vittorio handed Salvatore a small card, a holy image of Saint Michael the Archangel, the warrior saint, trampling a serpent beneath his feet. On the back of the card, written in Vittorio's own hand, was a prayer. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Punish those who would harm the family. Let your sword be swift, and your mercy be silent. Father Domenico anointed Salvatore's forehead with oil. He spoke the words of blessing. He offered him communion. And then, in a ritual that was not found in any missal, Vittorio pricked Salvatore's thumb with a needle, let a single drop of blood fall onto the holy card, and set it aflame in a brass dish. You are bound now, Vittorio said, to God, to family, to silence. If you break this bond, you burn as this card burns. Salvatore watched the card curl and blacken. He felt the weight of the knife still in his pocket. He felt the oil drying on his skin. He felt, for the first time in his life, that he belonged to something larger than himself. He did not know then that belonging would cost him everything. What followed was a decade of ascension. Salvatore proved himself efficient, disciplined, and most importantly, loyal. He did not skim. He did not boast. He did not question orders. He carried out executions with the same methodical precision he would later use to teach his daughter how to tie her shoes, how to say her prayers, how to hold a gun without flinching. By 1966, at the age of 29, Salvatore had become a capo, overseeing a crew of 12 men who ran protection rackets, loan sharking operations, and a smuggling network that moved everything from cigarettes to heroin through the port of Palermo. He kept meticulous records in a leather-bound ledger, each transaction noted in his small, careful handwriting. Beside each entry, he wrote a single word: resolved. Lived in a villa on the hills overlooking the city, a property that had once belonged to a nobleman who had fled to Argentina after the war. The villa had high walls, iron gates, and a garden where lemon trees grew in neat rows, their fruit heavy and golden in the Sicilian sun. It was in this garden that Salvatore met Giuliana. She was 22, the daughter of a baker in the old quarter, a woman with dark eyes and a voice that could make a hymn sound like a lullaby. She did not know at first what Salvatore did for a living. She knew only that he was courteous, that he brought her flowers, that he spoke to her as if she were made of something precious. They married in the spring of 1967, in the same chapel where Salvatore had been initiated. Father Domenico performed the ceremony. Vittorio stood as witness. Giuliana wore white lace and carried a bouquet of jasmine. Salvatore wore a dark suit and a gold ring that had belonged to his father, a man he had never known. On their wedding night, Giuliana asked him, "What do you do, Salvatore? What is it that keeps you out so late that makes men look at you the way they do?" He did not lie to her. He said, "I protect our family. I make sure we are never hungry, never afraid, never at the mercy of men who would take what is ours." She did not ask again. In 1977, Giuliana gave birth to a daughter. They named her Lucia, after Salvatore's mother, and Benedetta, after the saint of healing. The birth was difficult. Giuliana hemorrhaged. The doctors worked through the night. When Salvatore finally held his daughter, her skin still wrinkled and red, her eyes barely open, he made a promise. "No one will ever hurt you," he whispered. "Not while I am alive." He did not say, "Not even me." Lucia grew up in the villa surrounded by lemon trees and armed men. She learned to read from her mother, who taught her the lives of the saints. She learned to pray from Father Domenico, who visited every Sunday to say Mass in the private chapel. She learned to be silent from her father, who taught her that some questions were dangerous, that some doors were not to be opened, that some men were not to be trusted. She also learned, though no one taught her directly, that her father was feared. She saw it in the way men lowered their eyes when he entered a room. She saw it in the way her mother's hands trembled when Salvatore came home late, his knuckles bruised, his shirt stained. She saw it in the way the villa's guards stood straighter when he passed, the way they touched their hats, the way they called him Don Salvatore even though he told them not to. And she saw it, most clearly, on the night of her 5th birthday. The party was held in the garden. There were tables laden with pastries, a musician playing accordion, children from the neighborhood running between the lemon trees. Juliana had made a cake in the shape of a dove, its wings spread wide, its body dusted with powdered sugar. Lucia was opening presents when a man arrived unannounced. His name was Marco Vitale, a rival capo from Catania, a man with a reputation for cruelty and a grudge against the Teresi family that went back 2 generations. He walked through the gate as if he owned it, flanked by 2 men in dark coats. Salvatore met him at the edge of the garden. The music stopped. The children fell silent. Juliana pulled Lucia close. "This is a child's party," Salvatore said, his voice low and even. "You are not welcome here." Marco smiled. "I came to pay my respects, Don Salvatore, to wish your daughter a long and happy life." He looked past Salvatore, directly at Lucia. Such a beautiful girl. It would be a shame if anything happened to her. Salvatore did not raise his voice. He did not move. He simply said, "Leave. Now." Marco laughed. "Or what? You'll kill me in front of your daughter? In front of all these people?" Salvatore said nothing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small revolver, a .38 Sitting Sion. .38 special, its barrel short and blunt. He did not point it at Marco. He simply held it, his hand steady, his eyes locked on Marco's face. "You have 10 seconds, Salvatore said. "If you are still here when I reach 0, I will shoot you. And then I will shoot your men. And then I will go to Catania and burn your house to the ground with your family inside. Do you understand?" Marco's smile faltered. He looked at the gun. He looked at Salvatore's eyes. He looked at the children, the cake, the lemon trees. He looked at Lucia, who was watching him with wide, unblinking eyes. He left. That night, after the guests had gone, after Juliana had put Lucia to bed, Salvatore sat alone in the garden. He held the revolver in his lap, turning it over in his hands. He thought about the look on his daughter's face when he had drawn the gun. He thought about the way she had not cried, had not looked away, had simply watched. He thought, "She is learning." He thought, "She is learning too much." He thought, "But what choice do I have?" The next morning, he went to a craftsman in Palermo, a man who made custom furniture, who had once built a false-bottomed chest for smuggling documents. Salvatore showed him the porcelain doll that Lucia carried everywhere, the one Juliana had bought her for her 3rd birthday. He showed him the revolver. "I need you to make a compartment," Salvatore said, "inside the doll, big enough for this." The craftsman looked at him. "Don Salvatore, this is a child's toy." "I know what it is," Salvatore said. "Can you do it or not?" The craftsman could. It took him 3 days. He hollowed out the doll's torso, reinforced the structure with a thin steel frame, and created a compartment lined with velvet. The gun fit perfectly. The doll's dress, when replaced, showed no sign of alteration. The weight was noticeable, but only if you were looking for it. Salvatore brought the doll home. He did not tell Giuliana what he had done. He gave it to Lucia and said, "This is Angelina. She will keep you safe." Lucia held the doll, felt its weight, and looked up at her father. "She's heavy, Papa." "That's because she's strong," Salvatore said. "Like you," Lucia smiled. Salvatore did not. How does a man who has built his life on violence teach his daughter to navigate a world he knows is designed to destroy her? What kind of love is it that arms a child not with knowledge or opportunity, but with a weapon and the unspoken understanding that she will one day need to use it? And how does a father reconcile the desire to protect with the knowledge that protection, in his world, is indistinguishable from preparation for war? These are the questions Salvatore never asked himself. Or perhaps he did, late at night, alone in the garden, the scent of lemons heavy in the air, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like the Sicilian heat. But if he did, he never spoke them aloud. He never wrote them in his ledger. He never confessed them to Father Domenico. He simply continued. In 1979, when Lucia was 7, Giuliana began to change. She grew quieter. She stopped singing. She spent hours in the chapel, kneeling before the statue of the Virgin Mary, her lips moving in silent prayer. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She would wake in the middle of the night, screaming, convinced that men were coming through the walls, that the lemon trees were on fire, that Lucia was drowning in the fountain in the garden. Salvatore brought doctors. They prescribed sedatives. They spoke of nerves, of exhaustion, of the strain of being a mother and a wife in a household like theirs. They did not speak of what Giuliana had seen, of the nights Salvatore came home with blood on his hands, of the men who disappeared after visiting the villa, of the phone calls in the middle of the night that ended with Salvatore leaving without explanation. They did not speak of the fact that Giuliana had begun to understand what her husband was. One night, Giuliana came to Salvatore's study. He was at his desk, writing in the ledger. She stood in the doorway, her nightgown white and ghostly in the lamplight. "I want to leave," she said. Salvatore looked up. "Leave? Take Lucia. Go to my sister's in Messina, just for a while." "You are safe here," Salvatore said. "Safer than anywhere else." "I am not safe," Giuliana said. "I am a prisoner, and so is she." Salvatore closed the ledger. "You knew what I was when you married me." "I knew you were a man," Giuliana said. "I did not know you were a monster." Salvatore stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not move toward her. He simply said, "If you leave, you will not be safe. If you take Lucia, she will not be safe. Do you understand? The only reason you are alive, the only reason she is alive, is because you are mine. The moment you stop being mine, you become a target." Giuliana began to cry. "Then let us go, please, let us disappear." "There is no disappearing," Salvatore said. "Not from this." Giuliana left the room. She did not speak to him for 3 days. On the 4th day, she was gone. Salvatore came home to find the villa empty. Giuliana's clothes were still in the closet. Her jewelry was still in the drawer. The only thing missing was Giuliana herself. He searched the house. He searched the garden. He called his men. They searched the city. They questioned the neighbors. They checked the train stations, the bus depots, the ports. They found nothing. No body, no note, no witnesses, just absence. Lucia, who was 7 years old, asked her father every day for a month, "Where is Mama?" Salvatore told her the truth. or the only version of it he could bear. I don't know. He did not tell her what he suspected, that Juliana had not left, that someone had taken her, that someone, perhaps Marco Vitale, perhaps another enemy, perhaps someone within his own organization, had decided that the best way to hurt Salvatore Torrisi was not to kill him, but to take the one thing he could not protect. He did not tell her that he had failed. He simply held her and let her cry and promised her again, "No one will ever hurt you, not while I am alive." And then he taught her how to use the gun. The lessons began in the basement of the villa, in a room that had once been a wine cellar. Salvatore had converted it into a shooting range, soundproofed and ventilated, with targets mounted on the far wall. He brought Lucia down on a Sunday morning, after Mass, after Father Domenico had left. He showed her the doll. He showed her how to open the compartment. He showed her the gun. "This is a Beretta," he said. "It is small, but it is powerful. It can kill a man if you know where to aim." Lucia, who was 8 years old, looked at the gun. She looked at her father. She said, "Why do I need to know this, Papa?" "Because the world is full of wolves," Salvatore said, "and I will not always be here to protect you." He taught her how to hold it, how to load it, how to aim, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger, not pull it, how to stay calm when the gun kicked back, when the noise filled the room, when the target's center tore open. He taught her, most importantly, when to use it. "You do not draw this weapon unless you intend to fire it," he said. "You do not fire it unless you intend to kill. Do you understand?" Lucia nodded. "Say it," Salvatore said. "I do not draw unless I intend to fire. I do not fire unless I intend to kill." "Good," Salvatore said. "Now shoot." She did. The first shot went wide. The second hit the edge of the target. The third, the fourth, the fifth, each one closer to the center. By the 10th shot, she was hitting the heart. Salvatore watched his daughter, this small girl with dark eyes and steady hands, and he felt something he could not name. Pride, perhaps, or horror, or both. He thought, "She is ready." He thought, "She should never have to be ready." He thought, "But she is mine, and this is the only way I know to keep her alive." Over the next 2 years, the lessons continued. Lucia learned to shoot with both hands. She learned to reload in the dark. She learned to disassemble the gun, clean it, reassemble it. She learned to recognize the sound of a safety clicking off, the weight of a loaded magazine, the smell of gunpowder. She also learned other things. She learned that her father's men called him Don Salvatore, not out of respect, but out of fear. She learned that the villa's walls were high, not to keep people out, but to keep secrets in. She learned that the lemon trees in the garden were beautiful, but that beauty could hide rot. She learned, most of all, that her father loved her in the only way he knew how, by preparing her for a war she did not yet understand. In 1983, the war came. A new organization had risen in Palermo, a coalition of younger bosses who believed the old ways, the codes, the rituals, the deference to men like Salvatore, were obsolete. They called themselves La Nuova Famiglia, the new family. They did not ask for permission. They did not pay tribute. They simply took. Salvatore's crew was hit first. 2 of his men were killed in a drive-by shooting outside a cafe. A third was found in the trunk of a car, his throat cut, a note pinned to his chest. "The old guard is dead." Salvatore called a meeting with the other capos. He proposed a united response, a coordinated strike against La Nuova Famiglia. But the other capos were afraid. They had families. They had businesses. They did not want war. Salvatore found himself alone. He began to prepare. He moved money out of Italy into accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. He sent Lucia to stay with a cousin in the countryside, a woman who ran a small farm and asked no questions. He fortified the villa, installed cameras, hired more guards, and he waited. The attack came on a Tuesday night in August. 4 men armed with automatic rifles stormed the villa's gates. The guards fought back. 2 of the attackers were killed. The other 2 escaped. But the message was clear. Salvatore was a target, and if he stayed in Palermo, he would die. He made the decision that night. He would send Lucia to America, to New York, where he had contacts, where she could disappear into the Italian neighborhoods of Brooklyn, where she could start a new life far from the violence that had consumed his. He did not ask her if she wanted to go. He simply told her. "You will leave in 2 weeks," he said. "You will go to New York. A family there will take care of you. You will go to school. You will be safe." Lucia, who was 11 years old, looked at her father. "What about you, Papa?" "I will join you," Salvatore said, "when it is safe." "When will it be safe?" Salvatore did not answer. The night before Lucia left, Salvatore took her to the garden. The lemon trees were heavy with fruit, their branches bending under the weight. The air smelled of jasmine and salt from the sea. He gave her the doll. "Angelina will keep you safe," he said. "Do you remember what I taught you?" "I do not draw unless I intend to fire," Lucia said. "I do not fire unless I intend to kill." "Good," Salvatore said. He knelt beside her, the same way he had in the photograph the customs agents would find. He placed his hand on her shoulder. "You are stronger than you know, Lucia, stronger than I ever was. Do not let anyone make you forget that." Lucia looked at the doll. She looked at her father. She said, "Will I see you again?" Salvatore smiled, but his eyes were wet, of course. He was lying. He knew, even then, that he would not survive the war. He knew that La Nuova Familia would come for him, that the other capos would not help him, that his men would scatter or betray him. He knew that the only way to keep Lucia safe was to send her away, to sever the connection, to make sure that when they came for him, they would not come for her. He knew all of this, and he sent her anyway. Because that is what love looked like in his world. Love was a loaded gun in a porcelain doll. Love was a note that said, "For when the wolves come." Love was the willingness to let your daughter hate you if it meant she would live. On September 22, 1984, Lucia Benedetta Teresi boarded a plane from Palermo to New York. She carried a single suitcase and a porcelain doll named Angelina. She did not cry. She did not look back. She was detained at customs. The gun was found. The note was read. The photograph was examined. The agents asked her questions. Where was she going? Who was meeting her? Why did she have a gun? She said nothing. She simply held the doll's empty body and hummed the lullaby her mother had sung, the one she could barely remember, the one that smelled of jasmine and sounded like goodbye. The agents called the FBI. The FBI called Interpol. Interpol called the Italian authorities. The Italian authorities said, "Salvatore Teresi is a person of interest in multiple homicides. He is believed to be the head of a criminal organization. We have been trying to locate him for months." They asked Lucia, "Where is your father?" She said, "I don't know." She was telling the truth. 3 weeks later, Salvatore Teresi's body was found in a warehouse on the outskirts of Palermo. He had been shot 7 times, once in each limb, once in the stomach, once in the chest, and once in the head. His hands had been cut off and placed in his lap. His mouth had been stuffed with lemon peels. The message was clear. This is what happens to those who resist. This is what happens to the old guard. No one claimed the body. No one attended the funeral. Father Domenico said a private mass, alone in the chapel on the Torrisi estate, which had been seized by the state. He burned a holy card of St. Michael the Archangel and prayed for Salvatore's soul. He did not know if the prayer would be heard. Lucia was placed in foster care in New York. The gun was entered into evidence. The doll was returned to her, empty. She carried it with her from home to home, from school to school, from year to year. She never spoke about her father. She never spoke about the villa, the lemon trees, the lessons in the basement. She never spoke about the night Marco Vitale came to her birthday party, or the night her mother disappeared, or the night her father knelt beside her in the garden and promised her she would be safe. She simply carried the doll and remembered. In 1995, when Lucia was 18, she enlisted in the United States Army. She scored in the top percentile on marksmanship tests. She was recruited into military intelligence. She served 2 tours in the Balkans, 1 in Iraq. She learned to speak Arabic, Pashto, and Russian. She learned to interrogate prisoners, to analyze intelligence, to operate in hostile environments. She learned, in other words, to be exactly what her father had trained her to be, a soldier in a war that never ended. She retired from the military in 2005 with the rank of captain. She moved to a small town in upstate New York, a place with no mafia, no violence, no memories. She bought a house with a garden. She planted lemon trees. She kept the doll on a shelf in her bedroom, its empty torso a reminder of what she had carried, what she had lost, what she had become. She never married. She never had children. She never returned to Sicily. But every year, on September 22nd, the anniversary of the day she was detained at JFK, she takes the doll down from the shelf. She opens the compartment. She places a single bullet inside, the same caliber as the gun her father gave her, the gun that was taken from her and locked away in an evidence locker somewhere in New York. She closes the compartment. She holds the doll. She hums the lullaby. And she remembers her father's last words to her, the ones he whispered in the garden the night before she left. You are stronger than you know. Do not let anyone make you forget that. She has not forgotten, but she has also not forgiven. Because how do you forgive a man who loved you so much that he armed you for a war you never wanted to fight? How do you forgive a man who believed that the greatest gift he could give you was the ability to kill? How do you forgive a man who chose to die rather than let you see him weak, rather than let you know that he too was afraid? These are the questions Lucia asks herself every year, on that anniversary, in the silence of her garden, surrounded by lemon trees that will never taste like the ones in Sicily, that will never smell like home. And every year, the answer is the same. You don't. You simply carry the weight. You carry the doll. You carry the memory of a man who thought love and violence were the same thing, who thought protection and preparation were interchangeable, who thought that teaching his daughter to survive meant teaching her to kill. You carry it because it is the only inheritance he left you. You carry it because you are his daughter, and you are stronger than you know. You carry it because the wolves are always coming, and you will be ready. In 2018, a journalist researching the history of Cosa Nostra in Sicily came across a sealed file in the archives of the Palermo police. The file was labeled Torrisi, Salvatore, deceased, case closed. Inside, among the crime scene photographs and witness statements, was a single photograph that had not been catalogued. It showed a man in his 50s, silver-haired, wearing a dark suit, kneeling beside a little girl in a garden filled with lemon trees. His hand rested on her shoulder. Her hand rested on a porcelain doll. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that matched the note found in the doll at JFK, were 3 words: "She is ready." The journalist tried to locate Lucia Benedetta Teresi. She found military records, discharge papers, a last known address in upstate New York. She sent letters. She made phone calls. She received no response. She did, however, receive a package. Inside was a porcelain doll, its torso hollow, its dress white lace, its painted face serene. There was no note, no return address, just the doll and the weight of everything it had once carried. The journalist placed the doll on her desk. She looked at it for a long time. She thought about the little girl at the airport, humming a lullaby, holding an empty shell. She thought about the father who had filled that shell with a weapon and called it love. She thought about the daughter who had carried that weapon across an ocean, across a lifetime, across the unbridgeable distance between protection and harm. She thought, some gifts are curses. She thought, some curses are gifts. She thought, and some stories are both. She never wrote the article. The doll still sits on her desk. Sometimes, late at night, when the office is empty and the city is quiet, she picks it up. She feels its weight. She wonders what it would be like to carry something like that, to know that your father's love was a loaded gun, that your inheritance was a war you did not start and could not end. She wonders what Lucia Benedetta Teresi thinks about, alone in her garden, surrounded by lemon trees that will never be home. She wonders if Lucia ever opens the compartment, if she ever places a bullet inside, if she ever holds the doll and remembers the man who knelt beside her and promised her she would be safe. She wonders if Lucia knows that her father kept his promise in the only way he could. She wonders if that is enough. The truth is, it will never be enough, because Salvatore Teresi did not just give his daughter a gun. He gave her a worldview. He gave her the belief that love is measured in caliber, that safety is achieved through violence, that the only way to protect what you cherish is to be willing to destroy what threatens it. He gave her, in other words, the same curse that had been given to him, the belief that to be strong, you must be willing to kill, that to be loved, you must be feared, that to survive, you must become the thing you were taught to fight. And Lucia, who is stronger than she knows, who has carried that curse across continents and decades, who has planted lemon trees in a place that will never be Sicily, who has built a life that her father would not recognize and could not understand. Lucia knows this. She knows that her father's love was real. She knows that his fear was real. She knows that his belief that the only way to keep her safe was to arm her, to train her, to prepare her for a war that would consume him and spare her. She knows that belief was real too. But she also knows that real does not mean right. She knows that love, when expressed only through violence, becomes indistinguishable from harm. She knows that protection, when it requires the destruction of innocence, is not protection at all. She knows that her father, in trying to save her, also damaged her in ways that no amount of therapy, no amount of distance, no amount of lemon trees will ever fully heal. She knows all of this, and still, every year, on September 22nd, she takes down the doll. She opens the compartment. She places a bullet inside, because she is her father's daughter, because the wolves are always coming, because she is ready. The question that remains, the question that Lucia has never been able to answer, The question that haunts her in the silence of her garden is this: ready for what? To defend herself? To become what her father was? To pass the same curse to a daughter she will never have? To teach a child she will never bear that love is a loaded gun and safety is an illusion? Or ready finally to put the gun down? To let the doll remain empty? To forgive the man who thought arming her was the same as loving her, and to forgive herself for carrying that weapon long after the war was over? The answer, like the doll, remains hollow. The truth, like Salvatore Teresi, is buried in Sicilian soil, and Lucia, like the lemon trees she tends in a place that will never be home, continues to grow in ground that was never meant to sustain her. She is stronger than she knows, but strength, she has learned, is not the same as peace, and peace in her father's world was never the goal. Survival was. She survived. The question is, at what cost? And who, in the end, pays the price for a love that could only be expressed through a gun in a doll, a note that said, "For when the wolves come," and a promise that was kept in the only way a killer knew how? The wolves came. Lucia was ready. But ready, she has learned, is not the same as whole, and whole is something she will never be, because her father, in his final act of love, did not just give her a weapon. He gave her a war, and wars, even when they end, leave scars that never fully heal. The doll sits on the shelf. The lemon trees grow. The wolves, somewhere, are still coming. And Lucia Benedetta Teresi, the Mafia boss's little angel who carried the gun in her doll, is still ready. She will always be ready. Because that is what her father taught her. And some lessons, no matter how hard you try, you can never unlearn.